Question. I often talk to people about my spirituality, but they regularly ask me why it is so important compared to a normal life. What is your take on that? Wow, that's a wide-ranging question. Basically, I would say that the importance of spirituality, it's only some people that find it is important. And if it isn't obvious, then I wouldn't personally try to persuade somebody why they should be interested in spirituality, because there isn't really any arguments you can come up with. What I have experienced in myself and the thousands of people I've met over the many years I've been on spiritual path is that we have an inner motivation that makes it extremely important for us, in fact, in many cases, more important to us than anything else, that we pursue spiritual growth. And for most people, it starts out with one of two things. One is that people have very intense suffering. It could be physical problems, but in many cases it's more psychological problems. They might have had a very difficult childhood. They might just have various psychological issues. So they are hoping that pursuing spiritual growth, using spiritual tools and techniques can help them find relief from this suffering. And the other factor is that people have grown up without getting answers to some of their deeper questions about life. And it is so important to them to find answers to these questions that they can't be satisfied with Christianity telling them there are no answers beyond the Bible, or materialism, there's no answers beyond science. So they have to look elsewhere because they have to find these answers. And if it isn't important for somebody, let them continue to live life the way they're living. If they are satisfied with their everyday lives, then why try to talk them into something? I tried, I thought when I was young, when I first found the spiritual path and I was so enthusiastic, I thought, well, everybody's going to want this. Why wouldn't they want this? But I very quickly realized that not everybody wants this. And if they don't want it, I wouldn't try to persuade them. Why would you? See, the thing is, you have all these religions out there that think it is epically important to convert everybody to their religion. And they are trying to persuade or even force or scare people into being converted to their religion and being baptized or whatever it may be. And that doesn't apply to spirituality. I mean, if you really grasp spirituality, it's a voluntary thing. It can only be a voluntary thing. You cannot be forced to be spiritual. And I explain this in some of my videos by saying that we are actually living inside an environment that is like a reality simulator. And the purpose of the simulator is to give us certain experiences until we've had enough of those experiences. And most people on Earth right now are having what I call an immersion experience, where people believe they are immersed in this world, they may be even a product of this world, and it's a real world they are in, that their minds have no influence on, so they are just victims of outer conditions. So the only way to change their inner state of mind and be happy is to change the outer conditions. That's the immersion experience. And it's part of what the reality simulator is programmed to do, give people that experience. So you start on the spiritual path when you've had enough of that experience and you want more than this. And that's when you go into what I call the awakening phase, where you now begin to look for a different explanation, a different understanding, eventually helping you shift your consciousness, raise your consciousness beyond the normal state of consciousness that human beings have. So, I know you can look at people out there and you can see that the vast majority of people are not happy with their lives. They're not satisfied. They are, in a sense, suffering. This is what the Buddha said 2,500 years ago. First noble truth, life is suffering. And for most people, it is suffering. And I used to think when I was young and naive and enthusiastic, and now I'm not young anymore, I used to think that people didn't want to suffer. So if you showed them an alternative to suffering, they would say, right, this is what I've been waiting for. But that belief didn't conform to my experience when I tried to tell people about spirituality. So my conclusion is that people actually want to suffer. They're not consciously deciding I want to suffer, but they are not willing to look for a different way to approach life. And if you're not willing to look for something outside your present understanding, your present mental box, it's because implicitly you want to be suffering like you are suffering right now. And then let them suffer. Pursue your own growth, your own path, and let them live life the way they want. The way I look at it now is all I can do is demonstrate that I'm in a certain state of mind. I'm not suffering the way I used to. I'm not suffering the way most people do. I have more of a peace of mind. And if people see this and they want it, then I'll gladly answer their questions. But to try and talk somebody into, oh, this is so important to be spiritual, I've just given up on that idea completely. It's really, as I said, you have to come to a point you've had enough of the immersion experience and you voluntarily shift, and now you want more. You want the awakening experience. And it can only be voluntary. I mean, if you look at fundamentalist Christians, Muslims, some other religions, they are making it seem like God wants to force people to come into heaven. But the reason the earth is created is to give us a different experience that we can have in the spiritual realm. And only when we have had enough of that experience are we ready to walk the path that leads us to the spiritual realm. Because in the spiritual realm are only beings who have voluntarily chosen to be there and have voluntarily chosen to give up the kind of experiences we can have on earth, which, as I explained in several videos, is that we're separate beings. The most common illusion on earth right now is that we are separate beings and we can do something to others that won't affect ourselves. Look at criminals. They think that if I steal something from someone else and the police don't catch me, I've gotten away with it. But they haven't, because of karma and because they are still in the same state of consciousness that made them think the only way to get something is to steal from somebody else. And so these are the kind of experiences, selfishness, self-centeredness, lack of consideration for others, you can't have in the spiritual realm. So the whole idea of a planet like Earth, which, as I've said in several videos, is an unnatural planet, is that we have the kind of experiences as separate beings we can't have in the spiritual realm. And only when we've had enough of all this sea of samsara, this suffering, this murder and mayhem, only then can we voluntarily choose to give this up and pursue a higher level of experience. And so what you see, and I fell right into this myself when I was young, in many, many spiritual movements, even some, not religious, but spiritual movements, even some New Age, some Ascended Master organizations, you have still the remnants of this epic belief that it is somehow epically important that people walk the spiritual path and that they are converted into our particular religion or follow our guru, because otherwise they won't be saved or go to heaven or ascend. And something epically bad is going to happen. And this is what I have completely overcome in the last, 20, 25 years, because I just come to realize that free will is the basic law of the universe. People have to voluntarily give up the self-centeredness, the selfishness. And they can only do that when they've had enough of exploring what you can do. Now, I explain in several of my videos that people become selfish and go into this separate state of mind by using the duality consciousness where always two polarities. So people will create suffering for themselves when they go into this state of mind. They will create opposition to themselves and each other. You usually have two groups of people who are opposing each other. And this is what creates most of the suffering in the world. So it's an inevitable part of going into this separate state of mind that you suffer. But again, it's within the law of free will that people are allowed to have as much suffering as they need to have before they are saturated and have enough and look for an alternative. So the way I look at it is that it is, I thought it was my role earlier to persuade people to give up on the suffering and follow the spiritual path. That's not my role anymore. My role is not to motivate people to follow the spiritual path and tell them why it's important. I can only be who I am, demonstrate that I may have a greater sense of joy and peace of mind than most people have. And if somebody then is interested, if they ask, how did you achieve greater peace of mind, then I can help them walk the path that helped me get to where I am right now. Not that I claim to be in any superior state of mind, but it is superior compared to where I was when I was 18, which is a long time ago. So this is my role. I can help people walk the path when they have decided they are ready for the path. But for me to try to persuade people why it should be so important for them to discover the spiritual path and follow it, that's just not my role anymore. I don't see it that way at all. So really, I don't see it as my role to persuade people why spirituality is important. It's just a matter of being myself, being who I am, and if people are curious, if they think I maybe have something they don't have, and then I can help them. I can say, which is the general motto of the Ascended Masters, what one has done, all can do. So the path I have followed is open to everyone. And I'm just, with my videos here, trying to share the process I've gone through and share the pitfalls and the breakthroughs so that hopefully it won't take as long for others as it's taken for me. But whether it takes long or not, it's not really my concern either, because it's an individual matter. It's up to the decisions that people make individually. So why is spirituality important? It really has no answer. If it's important to you, it's self-evident why it's important to you. And if it isn't important to you, then it isn't important to you. Then continue to have the experiences you are having in life. And I think as spiritual people, we get overly enthusiastic sometimes, out of compassion for people. When we discover a way to alleviate our suffering, to transcend our suffering, we see other people are having or suffering, perhaps people we have known for a long time, and naturally we want to help them. But it just can't be done. I also have a series of videos called the Avatar Psychology, where I talk about Avatar Psychology, which is a group of us who came to Earth voluntarily to help improve the Earth. And we often have this very strong desire to make a difference, to feel like it was worthwhile coming here. And we think, therefore, that it's our role to try to persuade people on Earth that there's an alternative. And I used to feel that way, as I said, but I don't feel that anymore either. It's like I'm not really here to persuade anybody to do anything. It really could be said that, as I talked about with the reality simulator, the immersion experience, it's part of our larger growth. Part of our larger spiritual growth is that we have these experiences as separate beings until we've had enough of them. And therefore we can truly, with inner resolution, it's not something we decide with the outer mind, but it just comes to us from within, I've had enough of this. And then you choose completely voluntary. I want something more. You find a spiritual teaching, you pursue a spiritual path, you are seeking to transcend what we can call the human level of consciousness, which I also call the consciousness of duality. And when you have that inner desire, inner knowing, inner decision, inner realization, that's when you know why spirituality is important for you.